G'day photographers, hope you're well. I'm making this video as revision for what we've talked about in class over the past couple of Tuesday mornings with Adobe Bridge, Camera Raw, Lightroom and Photoshop, and talking about some of those differences and where this slots in. We talked about the three programs like Photoshop, Bridge and Lightroom as being part of like the three siblings of the Adobe family. Okay, we've got Photoshop, the eldest child, can do the most things, is the tallest, can run the fastest, is the most experienced, the cleverest, all that kind of thing. That's Photoshop. Lightroom is the baby of the family. Okay, it's cute, it gets all the attention, it's simple, it does things really well, it's adorable. Everybody likes Lightroom because it's the youngest and it's the newest, and a lot of photographers are really excited about Lightroom. Then there's the middle child, which is Bridge, and as we get further along, we talk about Bridge's evil twin, Camera Raw, which really nobody likes to talk about. Okay, but between Bridge and Camera Raw, you can actually do a lot of things in that you can do in Lightroom with a lot of added flexibility. Lightroom is a great image editor for global adjustments. Remember, we talked about global adjustments being applying adjustments to the entire image, and local adjustments being adjustments you make to a specific area in an image. Photoshop really rocks at that. So Lightroom's really good, but it struggles and it sort of loses, its organizational skills aren't too good if you move photos around behind its back. So if you use different software to move photos on a hard drive, Lightroom just gets confused and then it can't find your photos. So if you're going to be chopping and changing and moving photos from one computer to another and using a mixture of Lightroom and Bridge and then just the regular Windows Finder or the Finder on Mac to move your photos around, there's a good chance Lightroom's going to become disconnected to your photos. The best way to succeed is Lightroom is to use one computer to download to, and use Lightroom to move all your files, because that's the best chance Lightroom's got of not getting confused. I mean, it's the little child after all. It hasn't sort of developed those sophisticated organizational skills. Bridge has those sorts of abilities. You can move files, and no matter where it is, if you send Bridge to look for them, it'll find them and it'll be able to display them, and then you can use Camera Raw to make those global adjustments. Photoshop's got no organizational skills at all, but it's the sort of the creative maverick. It can pull off unbelievable feats. We talked about in class about we brainstormed the most ridiculous ideas possible, and we couldn't pull them all off in Photoshop if we've got the skill, if we've got the time, if we've got the knowledge. Okay, we talked about swapping out a calf in a photo for a pink unicorn riding a tiger with dragon wings. That's what Photoshop can do. That's that kind of place. This video, we're going to look at Bridge and how we can use Bridge to go to our photos and make some edits to them. Let's do this. This is the navigational kind of hub of Bridge. At the moment, it's just pointing to my hard disk. What I'm going to do is I'm going to start to dig for some photos. Now, my photos aren't on my hard drive, like an external hard drive. They're on my internal hard drive, within the computer. So if I go into my pictures folder, I'm going to look for a folder which is reverse dated, and I'm going to open that, and then we're going to find heaps of folders full of photos. And basically I'm just going to open up one, and I know I downloaded these photos and shot them in 2016 in January and on the 27th or thereabouts of that month. So I'm going to open it up and we're going to see all sorts of photos from all sorts of RAW files. Olympus RAW file, Nikon NEF is a RAW file, CR2 is a Canon RAW file, CRF, something like that. All sorts of photos in here. If we click on one, we get a bit of a preview here, and that's what it looks like. In Brdge, we've got the ability to change our sort of working space. I quite like the film strip working space like this, because we get a nice big photo here, and we can still scroll through our photos down below with the mouse. Let's have a look at a photo we want to look at. And that's my dog Benji, who's a little bit out of focus. Alright, let's have a look at this photo here. It's just a photo of a building in Dean Street at night, and once I edited it, it ended up kind of looking like that. Cool. Let's see what we can do with this photo. If I double click on a RAW file in Brdge, it's going to boot to Camera Raw automatically. If I open up a JPEG in Brdge, it's going to boot to Photoshop automatically. It's going to go straight to that end goal. The theory being that in your general workflow with your images, you're going to want to apply some broad global adjustments to a RAW file to, while you've got access to all that information, you're going to bring out as much as you can, pop it over into Photoshop in a format it can handle. That's either going to be JPEG or TIFF or PSD or any of those sorts of things. Then you're going to make your local adjustments and you really fine-tune the image. Then you're going to save it into a format, either back into this folder, like I did. I saved it back as a JPEG into this same folder, or you can save it elsewhere. Cool. The reason why you can't directly save changes onto a RAW file is because it's a RAW file. You can't mess with a RAW file. It's just pure potential, but you can mess with that potential and then save it as a copy. We're going to go into that more and more as we progress during the year. So, if I want to boot a photo into Camera Raw, basically the guaranteed way to do it, no matter what the file type is to hit on the Camera Raw, opening Camera Raw button here, or you can press Command R on a Mac or Control R on a PC, and it'll open either a RAW file or a JPEG file in the Camera Raw. Most of the time when you click on a RAW file, in fact, I would bet my pinky finger that if you open a RAW file, it will boot straight to Camera Raw. So let's go Command R, and we're going to open up this file in the Camera Raw. Cool. Camera Raw's got some cool things going on about it. Basically, this feels very Lightroomy if you've been in here before. You can drag down exposures, you can increase contrast, you can drop your blacks, or you can move all these sliders around to produce a different kind of looking image. Okay. Say if I move my clarity slider quite, to the extreme, and I decide I don't like it anymore, that adjustment, I can double click on it and it'll revert it back to 0. And then I can go again. Now the nice thing about that double click is if you make an adjustment, move your mouse to the spot, double click on it, and then hover your mouse, and not move your mouse, and then click again, you get a sort of quick way to compare before and after these changes. So double click reverts it back, click it again, yeah, and you can see before and after. And for me, somewhere like that looks good on this photo. We talked in class about what all these do. I'm not going to get into that again in great detail because we had a really good chat about that. And we can, and And you will quickly get a feel for what they do just by experimenting. And I encourage you to experiment in big, broad movements and go, right, okay, this is the overall darkness and overall brightness slider. And then move in smaller movements until you kind of get to what feels right for you. The temperature slider is great for that because it introduces so many cool blue tones or so many warm orangey tones to try and adjust your white balance. And I think a little bit of warmth there is going to go a long way. Excellent. All right. Now, we'll talk more about saving an image in class, but if you're happy with that photo and you don't feel like you don't need to go into Photoshop, you can go to Save there, and you can save it either in the same location, or you could save it to your desktop, you could save it somewhere else, and you can save it as a format that either your client wants. They might want a TIFF. If you're uploading it to Facebook, a JPEG might be fine, or you can save it as a Photoshop document. Yeah, all of these things have different levels of compression, and the more they compress, the more file size you save. The less they compress, the more quality you retain. You save it as a JPEG. I like to save it as like, give it a word after it, so the file name stays the same, but the word edit comes along too. Again, we're going to go into this in more detail. For now, I'm just going to cancel. That's the Save button. Over here, we have the Open Image button, and that's going to boot the photo into Photoshop if we so desire. And Photoshop's going to take a minute to boot up, but we see it's getting active there, and things are kicking on. If I bring this photo back into Camera Raw while that's happening, and I hit the Done button, basically this closes this dialog and it retains these changes in Brdge. So if you're viewing the photo in Brdge, you'll see this little icon above here, and then it'll say, ooh, changes have occurred. If you view the photo outside of Brdge, you'll just see the regular raw file and it won't look like you've changed anything. But Brdge can see the changes you intend to apply, so that's why it looks different there. Cool. Photoshop is a monster of a program, that's why it's taking a minute to load there. Let's say now we've got a sequence of photos. We've got these four, let's go, this set of images here of my very patient wife in a cafe. If I select them as a group and then bring them into Camera Raw, let's see if my computer's got the grunt to run Photoshop, a screen recording, and Brdge. It does. But I'm going to close Photoshop because it's just going to free up my computer's brain a bit. Alright, now I can edit. Camera Raw looks exactly the same, but there's a palette on the side here where I can work through, I can work on that image, or I can work on that image, I can work on that image. Laura's looking pretty bored with me there. Sorry, Laura. And I can individually adjust, say, the brightness or the exposure and all those sorts of things. And I can make an individual change to that file, and then I can go to this file and I can make other individual changes. Watch what happens if I select them all, and I'm going to either use Command or Control on a PC to click each one individually. And if I hit on sync settings, and on a PC it's slightly different, there's some buttons up there. If I sync all these settings, regardless of whether or not I've moved them or not, and click OK, that one change you made, those changes you made to this file have proliferated across all the other photos. So if you've got photos that are shot in similar lighting, like a similar setup, you might have a shot of a bride under a tree and she's worked through various poses. You can edit one to a point that you like, and then you can select them and you can sync them, and all those changes apply across the board. It's a nice time-saving kind of method. Alright, so let's just go back to working on one photo. Let's turn all those horrible adjustments off. Alright, I think we're pretty much back to default there. Let's select all of them again. And this one's active, so this is the one I'm going to sync settings off. Go OK. And then basically I've matched all these settings back to where we started from. That's one way to work. So you can edit on one and you can sync the changes across the rest. Now if you've got a computer that's got, you know, reasonable grunt, you can select them all at the start. So we can go select all of them as we work, and watch the thumbnails as I adjust the exposure here. See, they're all adjusting at once. That's another way you can work too. Add a bit of clarity. Don't want to give too much clarity because, you know, we don't want to bring out all sorts of lines and things on, you know, young skin. That's not a cool thing to do. But yeah, we can adjust everything across the board, and we can click done, or we can click save images, and we can save them out as a group. So I could save these as a group of JPEGs to Photoshop. We could click done and we can work on them another day, or we could click open and we could fling them all into Photoshop. I'm going to leave the video there, guys, because I think that's a bunch of fun, cool things you can take away. We looked at navigating to your photos, opening them in Camera Raw, making some basic adjustments, and then we also looked at editing a group of photos and simultaneously, which is pretty sweet too. All these things you see in the Camera Raw editor, these are all Photoshop functions, and you can get to them within Photoshop. Thing with Photoshop is it's built like a NASA space shuttle, which is so everything's hidden away in menus. So initially it's a bit daunting and it's a bit hard to find stuff. So that's why I really enjoy playing around in Camera Raw, because it's got that really easygoing Lightroom experience where you can just move all these sliders and go from there. What Brdge is doing is saying, hey, big brother Photoshop, can I borrow some of your things? And it packages them up nice in an easy to get to spot. There's lots of ways to get to Camera Raw. If you got the latest version of Photoshop, you can access it via Brdge, or you can even open a photo in Photoshop directly and apply a Camera Raw filter. And we'll talk about that more in class. But for now, I just really wanted you to get familiar and comfortable finding your photos with Brdge, opening them up in Camera Raw, moving some sliders around, and really working out what you can achieve in Camera Raw. I think you'll really like it. Thanks for your time. Have a great week. Talk to you soon.